I'm Georgie Collinson. I am Australia's leading anxiety therapist. I've helped thousands of women around the world to master their anxious mind, working with the subconscious as well as our physical health, our gut health, our hormones, our nutrition. And I am just about to release my second book, Master Your Relationship Anxiety, which is all about how crucial relationships are when it comes to feeling calm and confident within ourselves.
Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. So today we're going to talk about high functioning anxiety. And at the risk of offending Georgie, it almost sounds like an oxymoron because as a A-type personality, and you may also class yourself as one, it does actually make sense because we're capable, we're high performing, and in the main, we come across as confident. However, that doesn't preclude us, as you will well know, from experiencing anxiety. So Georgie Collinson, as she said, is a leading anxiety therapist, author and creator who specializes in helping women with high functioning anxiety. We're going to talk about her latest book, which she's just mentioned. And today I'd love to welcome Georgie Collinson to the studio. Welcome to the Power of Women.
Thank you so much, Di. I'm very excited to be here.
Georgie, can I start with, before we get into relationships, just starting with the term high functioning anxiety? And at no point did I mean to disrespect by saying an oxymoron, but why did this become your highly specialized area that you focused on?
Yes, well, high functioning anxiety, as you mentioned, has its benefits. Often we see that anxiety as almost like a reason for our success in life. It's the perfectionism, that unrelenting pressure, that sense of being a high achiever that often comes with a really nasty inner critic. And yet we can still get our day-to-day tasks done. So it's quite insidious because on the outside it looks like you've got it all together. Maybe you look like you've got the social life, the career, all of these things going for you. But on the inside, it's a very different story. And that was my story. And that was something I really struggled with. A lot of people didn't realize I was struggling because I was so damn good at pretending I was fine. And so I've seen it suggested at times that high functioning anxiety is best described as being really good at pretending you don't have anxiety, which I think is a great way to sum it up.
So is it your friend or is it something that's holding us back?
Mm, Such a great question. Well, it certainly can hold us back because that voice of anxiety can be really self-sabotaging at times. It can have us think, what's the point? It can have us think that we're less valuable than we actually are. It can have us holding back our true selves in relationships and with others and feeling like we need to keep up a mask and protect ourselves and actually preventing people from really knowing who we are deep down, feeling really safe in this world. So there are some downsides, but it also ultimately is making us so uncomfortable that we have to address it at some point. And this is when people come and find me. It's like, this is no longer working for me. The benefits are kind of wearing off. And at this point, it's more of a detriment than any kind of benefit. So that's where we can really use this anxiety as a call to our growth, as a call to go and address parts of ourselves that we've been trying to ignore, trying to just push through and pretend aren't there. And what happens through that process, and this is where anxiety does become our friend, you'll end up being quite grateful for the anxiety that you went through, especially if you go through a period of really intense, heightened anxiety where you're ready to just do something about it. You'll be grateful for it because of the way that it catapults your growth, your sense of love for yourself. You have to find a way to love yourself.
Prodding us, isn't it? Getting us going.
That's it. And it will
Yeah.
also call us to come into more alignment in our lives with what really matters to us rather than those surface level values, trying to chase our tails, going for what we think is going to make us happy or what other people would want for us. And really coming back to what really makes you happy at your core. And that is a process that, yeah, we can never regret going through. It only gets better.
And you're specializing in women. You're as a therapist, that's your core focus.
Yes. And look, part of that is just the fact that I am a woman myself, and I get the experience of being a woman in this world, which is a unique one. It is different to walk around the world as a woman compared to walking around as a man, or a different experience. We have our own lens to view life through.
Yeah. And I'm thrilled that you've joined, because whilst a lot of the guests on Power of Women podcast are midlife women, you're certainly not. You're a younger voice. So it's really great to hear that somebody of your generation experiences much of the same thing as my midlife cohort do. And you guys are on, and people like you are on the front foot addressing it. So well done you. Love it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, well, we're all human, and we're all
Mm,
like battling our anxious minds, and I think there's a lot of areas where we'll find similarity all through our lives as women.
yeah, yeah, I think that's right. So statistically, what are the stats? How many women are suffering from anxiety? Do we know?
It's it's estimated at 1 in 4 women in Australia. Oh, sorry, 1 in 4 people in Australia, not just women. But I
That
suspect that's
sounds
actually,
low.
I know.
Mm,
I suspect
mm,
it's higher. And this is just what's reported, and that's what our official data says. But I mean, it doesn't take much to look around the world and even consider the interactions we have with friends around us. If you have
mm.
that kind of relationship where you talk about these things, to see that, gosh, it's everywhere. Like, who isn't worried about the state of the world at the moment, and just all the different things going on, even on that level,
Yeah.
feeling a sense of, gosh, where are we headed?
Are there um, triggers that are common in many of the discussions and therapy sessions that you have?
Yes, I would say everything circulates around three topics. Either our anxiety is somewhat relevant to our health, or perhaps trusting our body in some way. And certainly going through midlife, I mean, we're thinking, what's happening with my hormones? What's my body doing? So there's a lot of that distrust that we can work through and find a way to come into some kind of peace with and harmony with our bodies, that perhaps started a long time ago. Maybe this started when you first got a period, and there's so much around that stuff that has women really developing this narrative of not trusting our own bodies. So that's part of it, and that will often come with, I don't trust this sensation, I don't trust this emotion coming up, why am I shaking, why is my face flushing? These kind of things can really, really trigger anxiety for us, especially when we're constantly telling ourselves this shouldn't be happening and it's wrong in some way. What we tend to find when we follow the rabbit hole down there is that actually there's a really good reason why it's happening, and your body is trying to communicate something from a loving
So does
place.
the knowing and the normalization of the understanding of that suppress the anxiety?
Well, we certainly don't want to suppress it, because when we suppress, whatever we resist persists. Where we want to
Ah,
go is find a way
that's
to
the
actually
duck
get.
pedaling underwater.
That's it. So where we want to
Mm,
go is actually move closer to that anxiety, move closer to that deeper pain that's typically beneath it. And this is completely against what our instincts tell us. Our instincts say, go distract yourself, go have some chocolate, drink a glass of wine, go watch a movie, distract yourself from this uncomfortable feeling. Whenever we go closer to it, we're actually creating a real sense of lasting calm and essentially harmony with ourselves. There's a lot of inner
mm,
conflict. It's like we've got two parts of ourselves that are battling off, and there'll be one part saying, I feel scared. And then another part saying, you're not allowed to feel scared. You're being too sensitive. You're overreacting. Just move on with it. And when we've got those two parts battling it out, Di, it's really hard for us to just feel peaceful
mm,
and feel relief. And
mm.
I will say the other two areas where anxiety really gets triggered for us is financially, around money or career,
Makes
finding
sense.
our sense of purpose or feeling accomplished, or like, is there enough money? Am I safe in that regard? There's a lot of security tied up in that. And
Mm.
finally, it's our relationships, and these obviously can be romantic, intimate partnerships, which is rife for anxiety, but also family relationships are highly complicated. Friendships, I think a lot of women have experienced that isolation or some kind of bullying or exclusion from other
Mm.
women, which is unfortunately very common in the way that we've been taught to, I suppose, compete with each other rather than work together and empower one another.
It's interesting hearing that from your cohort because I mean that's nearly 61 now, and that was how we grew up, unfortunately, because there was few of us competing for a very small number of seats at the table. But is that really still playing out amongst your generation and your peers?
100%. And
That's
really,
disappointing.
it is, and it's almost like high school never ends, right? Like, you
Mm.
think it's going to get better, but
Schoolyard's tough, and life just continues on in the same vein.
yeah, it's friends choosing bridesmaids. It's, and then, you're the ones that I want, but not you. And
I remember that, and that seriously threw your confidence when you thought you were going to get a ticket to the ball, and it wasn't you.
exactly. So there's
Mm,
always something that's playing out, and part of it is that really we feel safer when we are united with a common enemy. So if there's one particular friend in the group that we can all say, "Oh, she's a nightmare," or "Isn't she a lot of drama?" Or "Can't believe she's wearing this to that event."
hunting in packs.
Exactly.
Mm,
It brings us together, but we're coming together from a wounded place rather
yeah,
than a healthy place. And so, again, it depends where we're up to in our journey, and being aware of these things and wanting to do that work on ourselves to
yeah.
really work through that and connect at a much healthier level.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your first book, The Anxiety Reset Method, you achieved incredible success with that because the book was released only in 2023 and was subsequently picked up for Oprah's book club. And as a creator and a podcast producer, kind of that's the recognition we all sort of dream of, and in many respects can only dream of. But so how did you come to Oprah's attention?
It is pretty wild, isn't it? And it's one of those things, and this is the one of the deep drivers and myths that perpetuates our sense of needing to be productive all the time and high functioning anxiety. It's the idea that the more action we take, the harder we work, the better our outcomes will be and the more success we will have. And I want to use this story as an example to blast that myth out of the water
Go
because
for it.
it's not true. And I think we can all think of examples of times where we've worked really hard and
Mm,
stayed for an all-nighter trying to push through to work at something, and then sort of look back at that time and think that wasn't really a fruitful pursuit. Now, for me, with this whole Oprah moment, it really came after, so it was a few months after my first book was released that all of this came about, because my book about 6 months later was released in the US, and that's where that attention came from. It was actually the publishers in the US who sent my book out, and my hands were off. I actually did
yeah,
not
right. So
force.
you're in the trust of others to put it out there.
It just happened, and it was, there's an element of luck in these
Of
opportunities, and
course.
obviously my heart and soul is in the work, but I did not have to force that outcome, and it wasn't so much the action that I was taking that led to it. And I just think that's
But it
pretty
was what you'd written. So
it was what I'd written, but equally, the work was way before that. And in terms of the steps it took for Oprah's people to kind of find my book, it wasn't really me specifically making that happen. And I just think that's one of those amazing things in life that shows us when we're in flow, when something's just aligned for us, when we're producing work really from our heart. um, it can take on a life of its own, and that the action of me writing the book had such a huge like flow on of effects like the Oprah moment that I couldn't have even imagined, and we're also well beyond the actual action I took, if that makes sense. I took a certain amount of action, but it had a momentum to it that just took off, which is
did you get to speak with Oprah?
I did not get to speak with Oprah.
Nah.
No, I know, I know. Wouldn't have that have been amazing?
Yeah, it would. So in your latest book, Master Your Relationship Anxiety, and as I was looking through the forwards for that, the book is broken down into 4 parts. And each of those sections, the title of each of those sections begins with the word fear. Now, I've done a couple of podcasts on fear, and as a former executive search specialist of several decades, I've got a bit of an understanding of that. So, but for the person listening, what's the correlation between anxiety and fear?
Such a good question. And I don't think anyone has ever asked me that
Is
before.
that
So I love,
right?
yes.
Mm.
Um, I would say that anxiety really falls under the umbrella of fear. And so whenever we're in a state of anxiety, we are in a state of fear. And
Makes
if
sense
we
to me.
if we want to simplify our experience of life, we can pretty much either be in a state of fear or a state of love. A state, and from love, the umbrella underneath that is happiness or joy or appreciation, gratitude. And we tend to sort of fluctuate between both. So when we're in anxiety, we're deep in that fear state. And the more we can jump over to love, the calmer we feel, the happier we feel, and the more fulfillment there is. And hence why relationships, being such a vehicle for our expression of love, can be so healing and important for anxiety.
hmm And as that saying Winston Churchill says, fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. And it's much the same thing, isn't it?
And there's so much heart and love and
Mm,
courage, right?
mm, mm.
So yes, we have 4 different fears that I've broken the book down into. And I must say, as a side note, trying to structure this topic into a book it took me just like a month to
Hard
do
to
that.
wrestle with. Yeah. So what were the challenges in that? Because it's so vast or?
It's so vast. I really wanted it to apply to all sorts of different relationships, experiences. And I've obviously shared some of my personal experiences in the book and of my
Mm,
clients, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't, weighted too heavily on just my perspective. And so I really needed to broaden it out. But essentially, I could categorize the different types of fears that come in relationships into 4 different categories. The first is the fear of loss and abandonment, the idea that you're going to be left, or even if you're in a healthy, stable relationship, that something's going to happen to them. What if they get sick? What if they don't come home from work? Which is such a place for anxiety to come up. And this is why I want it to
do
be
we
clear.
always naturally go into the negative or is that just how we're programmed?
Well, it depends. I mean, anxiety is always a signal, a call, bringing us back to more alignment with ourselves, helping us to meet a part of ourselves that's hungry, that needs something. And
Mm.
so if we've got a lot of noise in our mind saying, "Oh, you're not safe. What if your partner, isn't around? What if they
And
leave
that
you?"
noise can come from other people too, yeah? That's not necessarily just our noise. That can be, repeatedly hearing that from somebody else.
Totally. We
Mm.
do we are influenced by that. But equally, no one can convince you right now that the sky is green. If someone
Yeah.
says the sky is green, you know the sky is blue. So we have to at some level agree with that fear in
Mm.
order for it to really like stir something up within us. And so um it will call us to an unmet need of some kind. And this is what's so fascinating about working with anxiety rather than trying to get away from it and, oh, this
Yeah.
pesky, annoying thing, is that it will lead us to really meeting a part of ourselves, bringing contentment to ourselves. So, what that could look like, for example, is simply put, maybe we're not getting enough sleep, maybe we're overworked, and our anxiety is calling off in a totally irrelevant story to that, but it's just saying, come back to you. We need some attention, and I need you to take care of me.
And maybe we're all suffering from that one.
Oh, it
Yeah,
will
at
inevitably do
some
that
point.
for us.
Mm,
Yes,
mm,
exactly. So
mm.
sometimes it's got nothing to do with your relationship, but there's just alarm bells going off about all kinds of fear that if we follow that down, we'll find, oh, actually, I just need to remember to be feeding myself properly. I need to remember to take care of myself. But more often than not, there's an emotional need. And perhaps
Mm,
there is something we need to feel, some kind of pain within ourselves that we actually need to admit to ourselves. It could be that there's something from the past that's happened, a moment that is not yet resolved, where you did experience loss, you did experience some kind of abandonment, and the story never got a happy ending. It just
mm,
remained open. And part of this work is also going back to tie a little bow on those stories that have remained open and actually give them the happy ending. Reminding, say, if you were 5 and it was really painful every time dad left for work every day and you never got to see him, and there's this grief within you of that, oh, I'm always being left. If we can go back and meet that younger version of ourselves, we can actually start to tell her, well, that's not how your life is now. Now
mm,
you can pick up the phone, you can reach out to people, you can express how you feel, you can ask for what you need. Life's very different now to the limited experience you had as a 5-year-old. And so,
mm.
like, how amazing to be able to produce that happy ending for those unresolved parts of yourself. And
Yeah.
now, as an adult, you just get to move through your life with more peace.
Mm. So how much of you is wrapped up in this book? How much of the experiences of relationship anxiety from a personal level is wrapped up in these pages?
Mm, good question. There's certainly quite a lot of me because
Mm,
I feel that I could go to a deeper place and articulate things in a way that resonates more deeply with more vulnerability by sharing my own stories.
the lived experience piece, powerful.
Oh, yeah. And I've got them. But equally, I know from working with my clients just how vast our experiences can be. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to have those insights of my clients' stories. Obviously, all identifying factors changed, but I've been able to share a lot of those other experiences to ensure that if you read this book cover to cover, you are absolutely going to find something that you relate to that's going to hit a deeper nerve. And my secret hope is it will awaken something within you that you didn't even know you didn't know. That's not a
Mm,
scary thing. That's actually an invitation to simply become more aware and ultimately feel more love and more pride for who you are.
I like that phrase, an invitation. I think that's using it positively. So coming up, Georgie's going to talk to us more about how you can manage your relationship anxiety. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. So, Georgie, it goes without saying, I mean, we've all had a bad relationship or two or three. And some of them have been toxic, some of them have been a mistake, and some of them have been one-sided, and there's really only been one person in the relationship. We stay in some we're trapped in, sadly, and some we walk away from. However, human relationships are complex, and when it comes to relationships, anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing. And as you already said, it can be an invitation or it can be a signal. What actually is relationship anxiety when we peel that onion?
Such a great question. So, relationship anxiety, if we want to just summarize, it's persistent, pervasive doubt, fear, worry, insecurity regarding a relationship. And in the context of my book, we're really diving into romantic, intimate partnerships, although many of those topics can be extrapolated out into our family
Everyday
relationships, our
lives.
friendships.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just there are a few where it's really helpful to have that context of a romantic partnership to just go a little deeper.
Yep. Get it. Okay. So does the relationship, whether it's, let's stay on romantic, does the relationship need to be negative and going off track before anxiety kicks in?
No. And this is where it gets
Ah,
really fascinating because we could be in a wonderful, healthy, stable relationship And still within us, that anxious mind might fire off and say, there's something wrong here or something's not okay.
Seems too good.
Seems too good to be true. And
Mm,
it's a little like what I was talking to before about, what if that something happens to them? That's a real classic that anxiety can start to pick away at in a healthy relationship, wondering and stressing over the future of the relationship, not because you don't trust that your partner is going to be there to support you, but how can you trust that they will actually physically be there? I mean, we're too smart for that. We know what can
mm.
happen in life and how much uncertainty and unknown is there. So yes, it can definitely come up in healthy relationships. And we have so much influence from our society, from movies and even music, that's telling us things
So
about
true.
love that just aren't helpful, such as,
Mm,
when you know, you just know. So we've got
mm.
this sense of there has to be real certainty in this. And relationships are inherently uncertain. There is a sense of uncertainty we cannot escape
Well, we're
within
dealing
that.
with human beings. They're not cans of baked beans, and we don't know how they're going to react next, and we don't know what influences are going to come and change their perspectives. So, yeah, it's pretty volatile, isn't it?
That we've got two people coming together with very different life experiences, very different values, especially if you're meeting later in life as well, not just meeting as a early 20s person. If you're meeting in your 30s, your 40s, beyond, you've got a whole lot of life.
Which may be a lot of baggage.
Might be a lot of baggage. You're coming
Mm,
together with another person trying to get along. I mean, even in the healthiest partnerships, there are going to be conflicts.
yeah. So, are we always aware that, or always, do we become aware when anxiety kicks in, or can it be happening in the background and becoming problematic, but we haven't actually acknowledged that it's anxiety?
Good question. So I would say most of the time when we are aware of it, it's because we're seeing it play out. We can feel the anxiety, we're feeling in our body. I've lost my train of thought, my brain's frozen over. I am, you can feel the mind ruminating on a specific issue, and often we can see it there, but there are subtleties too. And that's where, again, reading the book cover to cover, you're going to uncover some of that stuff that you don't know that you don't know. Maybe you don't realize that there is this question in your mind all the time saying, are we having sex enough? Are we having sex enough? Am I ensuring my safety in this relationship and ensuring that my partner will consistently approve of me? That's one of our other fears that can
I
come
bet
up.
that's a huge one. Mm,
Yeah, the fear of any kind of rejection or disapproval. So if we might think that's normal because that's just in our own head, and to some degree, occasionally having these thoughts, of course, is normal. We're human. But if we're finding that it's interrupting how we show up, it's making us on edge with our partner and holding back our true self in some way, well, that's where we want to work on this ultimately, because if we are interested in it, you don't have to, but it's going to help you grow. It's going to deepen the connection that you have in your relationship and give you more of what you actually need.
mm. You mentioned movies and music have influenced our view on relationships. I also imagine the divorce rate, which is what is the divorce rate in Australia now? About 40%?
44%, which isn't
44.
pretty bleak, hey?
Mm. Except, I mean, reality is we're living longer. Lifetime is a lot longer than what lifetime used to be. So maybe not everybody makes that journey of growing together, and lifetime, if it's got, 40, 50, 60 years to it, it's a hell of a long time. So, and so that's not all negative. I've acknowledged that.
100%.
However, how much of that being such a prevalent end result of couplings in this country and around the world, how much of that's influencing our children's view on relationships? Is that causing them to say, not getting married, this is bullshit, not going there?
Well, as a child of divorced parents myself, I I can certainly speak to it, the way that it disrupts this fairy tale idea that you're going to marry someone and have this beautiful wedding day and then you're just going to, be together forever. It's, again, we're too smart. Our mind can imagine all those worst case scenarios, and then we look at statistics like 44%, and that can seem quite disheartening. So
Mm,
yes, I do feel that that especially for those of us seeking safety, security in a partnership, it's going to fuel some anxiety for us knowing that that is not a guarantee in our romantic relationships. And I completely agree with you. Often a divorce and meeting someone else later on can be a wonderful thing that can
mm.
happen to us. But no one's going into a relationship thinking, I can't wait to get my heart broken and go through the
No,
whole
but
process.
there's some upside when somebody else has gone through all the war stories and you pick up the partner second time round. Sometimes they've knocked out all the rough edges. So I can say that from experience too. So there can be an upside to that.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
However, as we look at, the longevity of relationships, and I think it's this deep impending fear of doom and pain and heartache that we all
Mm,
wish to avoid. Yeah, that can send us into a way of trying to protect ourselves from that. So that anxiety, that hypervigilance will kick in. How can I make sure this relationship works? How can I make sure I got it right this time? That
mm,
I'm with the right partner, that I'm attracted enough to them, that I'm in love enough, that they're in love enough with me,
mm.
which can be exhausting.
Yeah, relationships and exhausting are two words that come together quite well, so, or can.
Certainly
So,
can.
yeah. So let's get specifically onto the book, Master Your Relationship Anxiety. What could somebody expect to take away from reading that? Is it a bit of a workshop?
Yeah, so we're working through all the what if questions of the anxious mind. What if I'm not good enough for them? What if I'm too
Yeah, it's
needy?
almost a
What if
role play.
what if I lose myself in this relationship? So then whatever's coming up for you, you can really flip to that question and work through it. And then there's a narrative to explain what's happening and what's underneath this form of anxiety, this questioning that's going on for you to help you find the answers
Self-managed
within.
masterclass. Love it.
That's right. And then practices at the end of each chapter to work through if that's the thing that's currently coming up for you.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Um, Had you had this to work through in your past life when relationships had gone off track, do you think it would have helped?
Oh, yes. I wish. I
Yeah.
wish, because there was a lot that I was confused about in
Mm,
relationships. I didn't know I was confused. I considered myself to be a highly intelligent, self-confident woman who valued herself. And yet, I'd get
back to the
into.
point, we can all suffer anxiety, however highly functioning we are.
Yeah,
Mm.
and it was almost like I thought I'd got it right. I thought there's no way I can get this wrong. And that's why with one of my longer term, more serious relationships, I moved to England. I moved my whole life over the other side of the world. At the time, had
How
every
often do I hear that? Mm.
had every reason to think that was a smart choice to make, given the words I was hearing and the
Mm.
experiences kind of leading up to that. But the relationship ultimately failed and left me hugely heartbroken, but also catapulted my sense of I have to figure this out. I'm going to solve this for me because.
Journey of life. It's what resilience. Yep. Resilience building things that happen to us. So yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of, oh, I thought I used to feel in a relationship that it was a matter of always showing that I was impressive and shiny and interesting and almost like
That's
putting on a show
exhausting.
to keep the attention, to keep myself feeling like I was the shiny trophy on the shelf. And of course, that's unsustainable. That was a mask, and it took me a long time to figure out how to sort of unmask myself so that I could be actually loved just as I am.
Yep. You can sit around in your PJs and you can say nothing to each other and the world's fine.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it sounds like something I wish I had had 30 years ago. However, at the same time, a few tough relationships also teach us, um, or give us the hindsight to know what good looks like when we find it. So,
That's it. That's
mm,
it. And then,
mm.
I mean, ultimately, would you ever take back that journey? Like it's a wild ride, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I'm looking up thinking on that one. Yeah, there's probably one I would have drawn a line through, to be honest, but
But then
there's always one.
without that experience, would it
Yeah.
have created the awareness and the person you are today?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Yep, I can agree with that. So that's available on the bookshelves now. So that's going to be some. And if it's not, I'm guessing somebody can ask their favorite bookstore to order it. And is it something that's also available as a audio book, or does it work as an audio book?
It does. I narrated the audiobook in the studio just before
Wow,
Christmas, so it's all
well
ready to
done.
go.
Brilliant. Fabulous. So I've got one final question for you, Georgie, through my Power of Women lens. In your opinion, what is the most significant challenge women are facing today?
Hmm. I spent a moment thinking about this question, knowing you were going to ask me this, Di. And
Mm,
there's like a million things coming to mind, of course, that I could say. But when I look at the world as it is now and the amount of division that we have, I think one of the biggest challenges facing women is our distrust of men and seeing men almost as our enemy. And the way we need to move through is, and obviously there's a mutual sort of movement in this. We need both sides, but ultimately learning to receive the support that men often want to give us and forming more of an ally partnership with our men in
bingo.
our lives. Yeah, and letting
Yeah,
them support us. And not
yeah,
just men, receiving support and help from others in general, but this
yeah.
hyper
And that word ally.
independence. Yep, hyper independence, trying to do it all by ourselves, especially being a mother, taking on all the household responsibilities plus a career, plus doing, everything for being a partner as well. It's too much, and we're
Mm.
shooting ourselves in the foot when there's actually way more support available to us. Should we take the steps to speak for our needs and own that and be direct and clear about what we need and really let that in?
We
So,
need more of you out there, Georgie. Spot on. That is absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that. And that is a key message that just might become a social reel all in its own right. So it is. I mean, it's powerful, and that whole thing of collegiate and shoulder to shoulder and supporting each other. I think we kind of so many of us have forgotten about that. It's such an important part of life.
yeah,
Mm,
exactly. And we just have to come back together
yeah.
in some way and find that common ground together.
So, when you're not writing a book, you're working as a therapist. How can somebody find you if they're looking to engage your services?
One of the best places I hang out is Instagram at Georgie the Naturopath, but I'm also online. I've got a website, georgiecollinson.com.
Fantastic. We'll pop that into the show notes. And I hang out more on LinkedIn. I think it's probably a difference in age between us than I do on Instagram, but I am there as well. And I too have a website, powerofwomen.com.au, where you can find me, and you'll find me on LinkedIn under my name, Di Gillett. Thank you so much for joining us today, Georgie. It's such an interesting topic. The rate of anxiety out there has just exploded, and yes, there's been some life events and some world events that have changed that. But I think what I've learned today, if I think of what the key takeaway is we can use our anxiety positively to drive us and motivate us, rather than it being a noose around our neck and it's something holding us back. So I really appreciate that. And if you've really appreciated that, be sure to share this episode with somebody else. Until next time.